So, Mark, we're going to come to you just now. We're going to go through a bit of a presentation. Thank you again for joining us. We miss you. I spent a fair bit of time with you touring around Scotland, all over Scotland, and it was really good. We had a great time going around meeting people. It's great to see your face again, and we're really looking forward to hearing from you. So, Mark, without further ado, I shall hand over to you.
Thanks, John. Yeah, it's hard to believe it's almost a year since I've been in Scotland. Was a fantastic experience for me, and had an amazing amount of hospitality from the people in Scotland, and we've been lucky enough to host some Scottish visitors here in New Zealand since that time over the summer. Yeah, John, you were saying the sun is shining here today. It is 7 o'clock in the morning in New Zealand, and we're sorry to say we're heading to 25 degrees. Yeah, and warm. I know it has been quite cold in Scotland. I'll share my screen, and sorry, I did think I'd practice this. Yeah, this is people may know Claire Taylor, who's a farming journalist. Can you see that on the screen now, John?
Yes, Mark, that's fine. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, Claire is she's a farming journalist in Scotland, and she's doing her Nuffield scholarship, so travelling through New Zealand. We were lucky enough to host her on the farm, and we were on holiday up in the Coromandel Peninsula over Christmas, New Year, and we also hosted Hazel Moss from Orkney. Hazel and Brian, they've been travelling through as well, and the last time, this was before I went for a swim with Hazel at Cook's Beach. The last time I swam with Hazel was in the Orkney Islands in the North Sea, and the water temperature was 5 degrees. One of the strategies I use that we'll talk about a bit later. When I'm in the shower each night, I make myself think of 3 things that went well today, just as that positive mindset. And what I do at the end of the shower, I turn it to as cold as it'll go, and I stand there for 1 minute. And I was telling this, we were staying with the Mosses in Orkney, and I was telling Hazel this, and she said, I've been using cold water immersion for many years, and I find it very, very, I get lots of benefits. I'm going for a swim. Well, I swim 5 times a week in the North Sea, so you can come with me tomorrow. So I couldn't really back out of that one. So next morning I was in the North Sea at 5 degrees. So, but yeah, I think even Brian enjoyed the water temperature a little bit more in New Zealand in the summer. So yeah, but going back to what our presentation today. So what I'm going to cover today, a little bit about who I am and our farm in New Zealand, my mental health story over the years, and what's got me to where I am today, which is a hell of a lot better than what I was, and yeah, living the dream, really. All right, okay. So I'm Marc Gascoigne. I'm 57 years old, happily married with 3 adult children. None of them are farmers, unfortunately, but we're on a family farm here in New Zealand. It's been in my grandfather first purchased it in 1931. He was a sheep and beef farmer, as was my dad. We converted it to dairy in 1995. 480 cows here. We run a reasonably high input system, but that is still 80 to 85% pasture based. We calve completely all in the spring, so it and our labour setup I was hands-on involved for many years, but for the last 6 years, we've had a contract milker, and it's sort of a profit share scenario, quite common in New Zealand, where the contract milker employs his own staff and is self-employed and gets paid for the milk he produces, basically. So there's an incentive there to do a good job. So that's allowed me to, I'm still involved on the farm, but just not in the day-to-day, the milking, the stock work. Yeah. Now, as well as farming, I'm also involved in the Rural Support Trust, which is quite similar to Rasabi in Scotland, and also obviously a Farmstrong ambassador. So what got me involved in the Rural Support Trust and Farmstrong? Well, look, I've been farming now for 30 years, and if I'm honest, I probably had 20 of those years not very well mentally, suffering from anxiety and depression. It wasn't all the time, of course. I'd have my ups and downs. The tough time of year always for me was over that winter period, and I probably need to apologise for showing those photos earlier, because I know it is a tough time in Scotland at the moment. But that was always my tough time over the winter, and especially we probably don't help ourselves too much, because we calve all of our cows so that they're ready for that spring flush. So we tend to have the cows calving at quite often corresponds with the worst weather of the year. And because we're pasture based, day after day of rain does make it quite difficult feeding cows. And I think that was what really impacted me. If I wasn't able to feed my cows really, really well, it really weighed me down. And really, it came to the point where I hated farming. I felt trapped almost. It felt like a prison, especially being on a family farm. That extra pressure of, am I going to be the one that sells and pulls the pin after so many years of it being in the family? But it wasn't farming that was the problem. It was absolutely the way I was thinking about farming. It was my thought processes that were the problem. It wasn't farming that wasn't the problem at all. I think when I was growing up, absolutely no one was talking about mental health in New Zealand. I sort of was brought up to be, boys had to be tough. They don't cry. They don't show any emotion. We didn't show emotion, even good emotions. Sometimes I certainly cannot remember giving a mate a hug or anything like that. Or I played a fair bit of rugby, and I just remember you'd score a try and you'd stand up and run back to halfway, ready. No emotion. I remember our rugby photos. You'd stand there with your arms folded, looking as tough as you could. There was never any smiles or anything like that. So that's the sort of probably and there's probably a lot of us are the same. That's the era we grew up in. So for the years that I was suffering, I didn't talk to anyone about it. I didn't want to admit that I had a problem. I especially didn't want my kids to know that, underneath the mask that I had on, I just absolutely felt like having a good cry at times. I felt that pressure to be the role model for them and the rock of the family, if you like. I think, looking back, I thought if I admitted that I had a problem, I would be admitting that I was weak. I distinctly remember about 15 years ago, my wife Maria saying to me, and she was always a great support. She understood my difficult time of year was that winter calving period. But I remember her saying, "Look, it's November. Remembering we're on the other side of the world. June, July, August is our winter." She said, "It's November and calving's over, but you're still not very good. Do you think you should go and see the doctor and talk about getting some medication or something like that?" And this was about 15 years ago, and I just remember I couldn't believe she was saying it, and it felt like a real kick in the guts. I guess I thought she was calling me weak. So I didn't act on it. I really wish I had. Would have saved me a few years of anguish. And it really came to a head. This is about 8 years ago. I remember exactly where I was, paddock number 3. I was just getting cows in for morning milking, and there was nothing in particular that day that was really troubling me, but just without warning, it suddenly just felt like the whole world was closing in on me. I was absolutely terrified, and I remember looking around in the dark, just trying to see what was coming to attack me. It just felt so terrifying. And I describe it as the feeling you get if you're watching a horror movie, and something comes out of the screen at you and gives you a hell of a fright. That feeling of adrenaline that you have for a second, it was exactly that feeling, but it lasted for 10 minutes, and it was the most awful experience of my life. It was, I had a massive panic attack, basically. And my heart goes out to anyone who experiences panic attacks, because they're just absolutely awful. So that really scared me. And I think it was the way of my brain telling me that something is wrong. You need to do something about this. So at that point, I did go to the doctor, and I remember just that simple task, the simple thing of admitting I had a problem, walking into the doctor's office, sitting down and telling him what was going on was like a huge weight off my shoulders. I still remember that. He did put me on medication, which I know there is quite a bit of sort of negativity that I strike about medication for mental health. For me, it was absolutely the right thing. It didn't change me as a person. It helped. It wasn't addictive. I'm not on it anymore. And I had no side effects. So that was probably the right thing for me at that time. But the other thing that luckily, Farmstrong in New Zealand had been launched just a few months prior to that, and he'd heard about Farmstrong. And one of the things he said to me was to go and, when you go home, have a look at this farmstrong.co.nz, the website. And that's exactly what I did. And I used the tools and the resources on the Farmstrong website to get where I am today. So I made a lot of use of the Farmstrong resources. But so over the next, so we'll go through the 5 ways to wellness that I use pretty much every day of my life. But before we get to that, I was over the next year, I was steadily getting a lot better, but I was still in that I just couldn't tell anyone about it. I was still embarrassed, I guess, about my situation. I hadn't told anyone, and I lost a very good friend to suicide, and my wife's nephew over that following year, and it really struck me that I had no idea that either of them were suffering, and obviously they had no idea that I'd been through similar sort of a situation. And it really struck me that, okay, could I, if they'd known and could reach out and talk to me about what their issues were, they quite possibly would still be here today. So that's what made me decide to get involved in talking about it as much as possible, and just absolutely normalizing it. It's absolutely so common, especially amongst us farmers. So the 5 ways to wellness. But actually, there's a couple of things I didn't talk about in Scotland that I believe now are really fundamental to get right for our health, physical health and mental health. And yeah, one of the absolute fundamentals for me is sleep. And looking back, it was absolutely a major problem, a major contributor to my poor mental health. Back at the time, I would go to sleep at night easily. My head would hit the pillow quite early, and I would be I'd go to sleep easily. But I would wake up every night. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. Either 5 to 2 or 5 past. It was just like clockwork. I'd be awake, and I would I'd start to tune through things in my mind. Especially if there was rain on the roof at night, I'd be lying there thinking, how am I going to get the cows to whatever? It would just go on, and it would just be churning. And like a sleep deprived brain cannot function well. I couldn't think straight. My decision making would go out the window, and then it turns into a vicious cycle, because you get more anxious because you're making poor decisions, and then that affects your sleep even more. So it is a vicious cycle. And to be honest, I still have problems with this. I think I've got an overactive mind. It just seems to really kick off at 3. It's actually 3 o'clock in the morning for me now. But just a couple of strategies I use to overcome this. Like I have a pen and paper beside the bed, and I'll sit up and I'll write down whatever is going through my mind, and just tell my brain, look, now is the time for sleep. Deal with that in the morning. So I find that helps, just writing it down. And what I do then is I count my breaths. I don't know why, but I start at 30 and I count my way down. Another probably sounds absolutely crazy, but it's me. I sing "Mary Had a Little Lamb" in my mind, not out loud, of course, just over and over, and all it's doing is just emptying my mind and stopping my overthinking, if you like. Another real fundamental is our diet. Really important to have a reasonably balanced diet. And okay, I enjoy my donuts and ice cream as much as anyone, so I feel like I shouldn't be hypocritical and tell you to do something that I don't do, but it is really important. Just an example, we've a young fellow that we've got working on the farm just recently. I was at the cow shed early morning, and he turned up with a can of fizzy energy drink and a chocolate bar, and that was his breakfast. And yeah, that and I suspect he lives quite a bit on takeaway food. Not good for your physical health, but also it really can affect your mental health as well. So really important to get that good nutrition. And the other thing that I really didn't realize was how much it was impacting me is the sunlight. And yeah, that was a big problem for me. The winter blues, and so, and just doing a bit of research. I mean, exposure to the sun, well, what it does is it boosts serotonin, which is the mood stabilizing hormone, and serotonin is it's a precursor to melatonin, which, as you probably all know, is the hormone that's produced to help us sleep. So it's important. I had a look at the forecast for Edinburgh, and you've got a couple of sunny days coming up. So I never really realised it, but it's really important to get out in that sun, and it's also important to get there's good science behind getting some sunlight in your eyes as well. Not I used to always wear a hat, keep the sun out of my eyes, but just early in the day, if you can, there's receptors in your eyes that communicate with your brain, basically, that set your circadian rhythms and set off that serotonin and melatonin pathway. So even just don't look at the sun. That's going to be a bit crazy, but just get a little bit of sunlight in the eyes is really helpful for mental health as well. So the 5 ways to wellness that I use each day. So the first one is to connect. Look, when I was not well, the last thing I wanted to do was connect with other people. We'd be invited out for barbecues, would be invited for parties or whatever it was, and I would make excuses not to go. And all I felt like doing was sitting at home on the couch feeling sorry for myself, which is absolutely the worst thing that I could have been doing. It's so important to connect with as many people as we can each day, and because the trouble with us as farmers, we spend a lot of the day working by ourselves, and sometimes that for me, I overthink things, and being by yourself working on the farm is too much time to ruminate and go over issues. So things I do, I've got a group of mates. We call ourselves the Average Joes. 3 or 4 times a week, we either go to the gym, usually early morning, a bike ride, a run, and it's always is these guys. Actually, I missed Hurt Locker this morning because I'm talking to you. They wanted me to come and do the presentation from Hurt Locker, but I don't think that would have gone too well. But we always, but actually after the workout, we go to the Waikato River and have a swim, and we did that right through the winter after my swim with Hazel, and it's actually amazing how many people actually we got in. It wasn't 5 degrees. I think it got down to 11, but so still fairly cold. But I think the most important part of it is just having the coffee afterwards and talking a bit of bullshit, having a bit of bloke time if you like. So that's one thing I do to connect with other people. Just a couple of examples of initiatives in New Zealand for farmers. This has sprung up all around New Zealand. Surfing for Farmers, sponsored by local companies. the great thing about this is, look, it's getting people off farm, getting together with and meeting people. They are learning a new skill, and getting completely off the farm. It's always followed by a barbecue afterwards with a few beers. And another initiative is the Rural Riders, it's called. So mountain bike.
This is Storm Irene. We're going to be bringing some very heavy snow to Europe, 20 or 30 centimetres.
Guys, just maybe mute your... Yeah, thank you, Grant.
Oh, yeah. So, mountain bike, and also rural riders, so for farmers as well, followed by a barbecue. So it's on a different night. There's two different clubs that are doing that around New Zealand. So, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of opportunity in Scotland as well to get together with people. I connect with people on even down to a micro level, if you like. I was thinking about it on our holiday that we've just recently had over Christmas, New Year. If I go for a walk on the beach, I make a point of saying good morning and smiling to everyone that I see coming in the opposite direction. And I always say, if someone hasn't got a smile, give them one of yours. I try not to make it too creepy, but just even things like that, and that's still connecting with people. When I'm driving on Norwegian Road, our local road, I make a point of waving to everyone driving in the opposite direction. I'm sure it's the same on local roads in Scotland. In fact, I do know that that's the case. When I was up in Orkney, staying with Pete Moss, and he was driving me around, I don't think he had one hand off the steering wheel most of the time. He was waving to so many cars. Connecting, very important. Taking notice. What does this mean? Well, as an example, this is a blue Mazda 3 that about 10 years ago my wife needed a new car, and she thought this. I thought, yeah, this is quite a nice car, and I remember thinking, I haven't seen many of them around, so at least we're going to have something that's a little bit unique. But as soon as we started driving this car, suddenly there's blue Mazda 3s absolutely everywhere. And it wasn't yet. I'm sure people have probably experienced that. You get a new car and suddenly you see that make and model of car everywhere you look. And it's the brain is amazing that, you don't even realize you're doing it. Subconsciously, you're telling your brain to scan the world and look for, more examples of what you're telling it. So looking for more blue Mazda 3s, and you take notice of it. And it's exactly the same with if we're taking notice of all the shit that's going on in our lives, what happens is our brain subconsciously scans the world and looks for more examples of what's going wrong, and reinforces the way you're thinking. And I had another good example when I was not very well. I remember we had a broken fence post, strainer fence post beside the cow shed, and the wires were hanging loose. And I remember thinking, I've got to do something about that. But it was because it was close to the cow shed, I'd go past it 4 or 5 times a day. And I remember, when I first noticed it was okay, I need to fix that. It was a busy time of year, and a week later I still hadn't fixed it, and every time I went past it, it would just bug me. And I got to the point where it was, I was calling myself a useless bastard, that I hadn't fixed it. Look how it just looks awful. Yeah, and so it just that would really bug me. But when I got round to actually fixing it, the very next time I went past that fence post, I didn't take any notice. I noticed another broken fence post further down the track. So, yeah, what are we taking notice of? And I mean, we are all prone to having a bit of a negative bias, and I'm told that this is from evolution. The people who worried a little bit and were a little bit negative are the people who survived and reproduced. I mean, the people that looked at the saber-toothed tiger and thought, oh, I'm going to stay away from that. That looks a bit scary. They survived. The people who thought, oh, look at that nice pussycat over there, and went to try and pat it, were they're not around anymore. So the worry is survived. So so what can we do? What can we do? Sorry. What can we do to counteract, this negative bias? And I've got an inner critic as well that tends to tell me that when things are not going very well. Well, what I do is I completely flip it. So I make sure that I take notice of the good stuff that's happening every day. And when you start taking notice of the good stuff, there's so much of it that you just haven't noticed. I mean, a good example is when we would go through the winter. The memory I have of the winter when I was not very well was it rained every day. But that wasn't the case at all. Like this last winter that we've been through was actually one of the wettest winters we've had. But one thing I really noticed was there was a lot more better days than rainy days. But the fact is, when I was not very well, I was a crazy situation where I hate the rainy days, and when the sun came out, I'd be looking at the forecast and seeing that it was going to rain in 2 days' time, and I'd start worrying about how I was going to handle the rain in 2 days' time, rather than enjoying the sunshine that we had for the 2 days. So now it's a case of, when the sun's shining, I celebrate. Just every small thing I celebrate. So with the example of my broken fence post, now every time I fix something on the farm, I make a point of, I'll actually stop my motorbike and just spend 10 seconds just looking at the fence post that I've fixed, and just saying, yeah, that looks bloody good. So taking notice of the good stuff that's happening, rather than all the negative stuff. So, like I said, when I was talking to Hazel, so that's one thing I do in the shower. I'll think of 3 things that went well today, and they don't have to be amazing. They can be just quite simple things that went well. And the other thing I do is, when I get into bed at night, I think of 3 things that I'm looking forward to. And again, it doesn't have to be major things that are coming up. Last night I thought, well, I'm looking forward to talking to Scotland this morning. So yeah, it's just a case of just flipping my thinking and taking notice of the good stuff. But this can, it sounds quite small, And but it really takes 1,000 small things there's no one silver bullet that's going to help your mental health. It's 1,000 small things, and it's important to, creating a habit, whether it's a bad habit or a good habit, it takes 60 to 80 days, apparently. So, I tell people about these, taking notice and just saying in the shower, thinking of 3 things that went well today. And I know people, they might do it for a week and then they think, oh, I'm not feeling any better. This is not helping, so they stop. But it actually takes 60 to 80 days and before it's sort of ingrained, and then you start to and then you notice the good stuff that's happening during the day. You're not having to have the habits. A tool that I make a lot of use of is my delete button in my head. I used to be quite, as I say, overthinking things. I would catastrophize, simple things like a staff member might say something that annoys me, and I would be, especially if I was milking, having a lot of time to think, because we don't, when you're milking, you're not having to concentrate too much. It can be a bit robotic. And it would be going over and over in my head, and I'd build it up into something that it was completely wasn't, and I'd get to the end of milking and I'd be all worked up, and the staff member that had said something would, he'd say something again, and it would he'd sort of explain what he meant, and I'd think, I just spent 3 hours worrying about something that just was not worth it. 80% of the things we worry about don't actually happen, and the 20% of stuff that does happen, we find that we handle it better than what we thought we did. So, when something reasonably trivial happens, now when that first negative thought comes into my head, I'll quickly analyze it. Is this something that's worth worrying about? And like I said, 80% of the time it's not worth worrying about. And I will think physically, I'll think delete it. And honestly, again, it takes a bit of practice, 60 to 80 days, but I can honestly say, 2 minutes later, if you asked me what the negative thought was that came into my head that I was worried about, I wouldn't be able to tell you, because it's gone. I've deleted it. Might be something to do with my age and my memory getting worse. Not sure. So yeah, that's the important tool that I use, my delete button. Being active, this is really important for me. I showed you the average Joes, and that's a good thing. Combining 2 of the 5 ways to wellness, I'm being active and I'm connecting as well, and yeah, it does really. I've sort of looked into the science behind how this helps, and I'd really notice that if I was anxious and I was worked up, I found by just pulling on some running shoes or going for a run or punching the punching bag or whatever it is, it really helped. And what happens when we get anxious and worried, there's part of our brain called the amygdala, and it's the prehistoric part of our brain, and which it was very handy when we had, threats to our life in prehistoric times. It might be the tiger or whatever it was. What it would do, the amygdala would shut down the rest of the brain, stop our decision making, the prefrontal cortex. It would shut things down and put us into fight or flight mode to get away from the danger or to fight it. so the amygdala is sort of like a smoke alarm. A smoke alarm doesn't understand whether your house is burning down or you've just burnt the toast. It fires off. It fills us with cortisol, which is the stress hormone. Adrenaline. It's trying to make us do something, but it doesn't understand that, you know, modern day worries and anxiety can be due to you know, not being able to feed your cows properly, or they're not life-threatening worries, but that our brain reacts as if it is, and which is what works us up so much. So being active, what it does is I find anyway, it burns off that cortisol, it burns off the adrenaline, and replaces it with endorphins, which are, you know, the feel-good hormones. And I'm told that endorphins act on the brain in the same way as opioids, and you can get them for free. You don't have to go and see your drug dealer. So that's got to be a good thing. So yeah. So yeah, and recently I talked to a clinical psychologist, and he told me that of all the people that come to see him with mental health issues, if he was only allowed to say one thing that was going to help their mental health, the one thing he would say was exercise. But he said it doesn't have to be a big thing. Again, it's he said if you can set your watch for 10 minutes, walk briskly in one direction, when your watch beeps, turn around and walk back. So 20 minutes a day is going to help your mental health in so many ways. Number 3 is giving, and it's probably part of the reason I do my rural support work and Farmstrong work. I do it all voluntarily, and because there's really good science behind this as well, that if you helping someone else actually, or giving, actually makes the giver feel a heck of a lot better as well. So yeah, and so apparently is another neurotransmitter or hormone, oxytocin, that's produced when you help someone or you give, and it doesn't have to be a big thing. It just can be just simple things. Again, 1,000 small things. Just letting someone into traffic, holding a door open for someone, buying a coffee for someone, and that's. I talked about, actually, this is I'm ticking the box again for average Joes, being active, connecting, and also I buy coffee quite often for everyone. So yeah, so ticking 3 boxes there. I do, another habit I have, I every day I have to give a compliment to at least one person. If I could see anyone on the camera, I'd say you're the best looking crowd that I've ever talked to, but I can't actually see anyone. All I can see at the moment is John, and yeah, you're looking good, John. So that's giving, and this is a pretty cool saying. I think the best feeling of happiness is when you're happy because you've made somebody else happy. Very, very true, I think. Keep learning. This is really, really important for our mental health, to keep our brain cells ticking over, especially as we get older. And yeah, one of the benefits to come from my depression is, look, I learned about the science about why we feel like we do, whether we're happy or we're sad. It really helped me understand my what I was going through, what I'd been through, to know that, there is actually a physical reason for how you feel. It's the neurotransmitters, it's the hormones in your brain, different parts of your brain, and it wasn't because I was weak or pathetic, and that's what I was thinking at the time. But there's so many ways we can keep learning, especially in farming. But I think we all do make a big effort to learn as much as we can about growing the right grass and crops and keeping our animals healthy, maintaining our machinery. But I didn't pay any attention, and I think there's a lot of people that don't, to looking after and maintaining the most important piece of machinery on our farms, and that's our brain. So to keep learning, I keep trying different things. I've taken up brewing, so Gasmeister beer. I keep stepping up the extending my brewery, so I can now brew 115 litres at a time. So we've got our son's wedding in a month's time, so I'm busy brewing for that. Definitely there's a lot to learn, but these days it's it's very easy. We've got YouTube, you've got Google, you can how to, whatever it is. I Googled, or I got on YouTube and taught myself how to play guitar, which I'm still absolutely useless. But it's just, there's no way that you can, if you've got something you're worried about or anxious about, there's no way you can think about the difference between an A minor and an A major chord on the guitar and think about what you're worried about at the same time. You just can't do it. So it's also a good way of or it's mindfulness, isn't it? It's getting out of that endless loop of negative thoughts, just doing something different. And it's our brains don't like change, so we can't, if you get into a bad habit, what happens is the neurons harden and they create a pathway in your brain. But to counteract that, if you keep learning new things, it breaks down those neuron pathways. And so it is possible to rewire the brain. You can teach an old dog new tricks. So keep stepping out of your comfort zone and keep trying new things and keep learning. That's basically the 5 ways to wellness. It's not going to apply to everyone. Some of the stuff that I talked about, you're probably thinking, oh, that's not for me at all. But this is the important thing, just to find what works for you and lock it in and work on it. So Farmstrong basically, it really changed my outlook, changed my life. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but I don't regret what I went through in my years of suffering from mental health issues. Sometimes the view from the top of the mountain is so much better when you've been through the valleys to get there. And I think what I went through, and what I've done to get better has made me a better person. Hopefully a better husband and better dad, and definitely a better farmer. So look, I could have saved myself from years of suffering by doing it, by acting earlier. So don't be like me. Get onto it as early as you can. And even if you've never suffered from these mental health issues, I think you need to think about what you're doing to keep your mental health. Physical health we need to stay fit, but also mental health we do as well, because if you you don't make time for your wellness, eventually you may have to make time for your illness. So hopefully you got something from that. And
super, Mark. Thank you so much for sharing some of your day with us over here in Scotland. It's been fantastic. Again, I've got pages of notes here. I've heard you talk probably 4 or 5 times now in person in Scotland, but I learned more again today. I learn more every time I hear from you. It's been fantastic. Thank you all for joining us, folks. Please keep in touch with Farmstrong Scotland and keep an eye out on what we're up to. Mark is at some stage going to come back across, and he's hopefully going to do a bit of cycling over here. We've got a couple of cunning plans to see it to fruition. So if anybody's a keen cyclist, get in touch. We've got plans for it at some stage. I'll maybe hold on and chat to you afterwards, Mark. But no, please, folks, a virtual round of applause for Mark, and thank you very much. You've been inspirational again.